everyone, welcome to JP Reacts, where we're going to learn about how Democrats screw it up every time. This is a very dear to my heart topic, so hopefully you stick around after this. So welcome back. So we're going to take a look at a Reddit sub about why Democrats screw things up all the time, so let's take a look. So here's the title of the post. What do you think is the messaging issue Democrats experience when talking about very popular policies? So I'll tell you what I think before we read the post. Why can't Democrats message correctly? And I think it's in comparison to Republicans, right, when we're talking about messaging. A lot of liberals, Democrats say Republicans are always on the same page. They always say same things. They always are very, very disciplined when it comes to messaging. The problem I see with comparing it to Republicans is, for the most part, there are some that don't, but for the most part, Republicans don't really have policy ideas, right? The biggest thing that Republicans do is they say tax cuts, right? Everybody likes the phrase. We'll get into that a little bit later. Or no to any other policy that Democrats come up with for whatever reason. I haven't really seen them really focused in on anything else outside of tax cuts. They sometimes will talk about the culture war stuff or abortion or regulations or international affairs, but for the most part, there's not really a good idea on what their policy positions would be on it. They don't really articulate those policy positions. Their policy positions are generally cut taxes, which we'll get into a little bit hopefully later on, and basically anytime a Democrat says, I want to do something to help people or for any reason, it's no, we're not going to do that. For whatever reason. It costs too much, or it's against their philosophy, whatever their philosophy means, but it's basically no. So it's always easier to say no than it is to come up with ideas, right? And come up with new policy plans and whatnot. The problem with Democrats is there's a lot of different things they want to do. They want to work on climate change. They want to make sure everybody has a good paying job and they're respected in the workplace. They want to raise the minimum wage. They want better funding for education. They want higher ed to be cheap and affordable. They want health care to be affordable for everybody and everybody to have coverage so they never have to worry about it. And that is just the tip of the iceberg, right? All those big policies have little smaller things that go along with it. So it's very hard to get everybody on the same page because A, those aren't easy answers. Those aren't easy things to explain. And B, it's a lot of different things. So how do you get everybody on the same page talking about the same thing all the time? It's almost impossible. So let's take a look at the post. Okay, so the post says, marijuana legislation prohibiting stock exchanges for politicians, high-speed rail, election day as a holiday. They favor all these very well. Voters in both parties all want them. Yet these policies are struck down by Republican politicians every time for multiple reasons, despite the fact that Republican voters want these things passed. Kentucky Republican voters support weed legalization by like 60%. Kentucky State GOP representatives told them flat out that they will still not vote for it. So what are Democrats doing wrong in their messaging? If Republican voters are not having their voices heard by Republican politicians they vote for, then how do Democrats message that failure to Republican voters and swing voters? So I see this as a combination of things. So yeah, I forgot about weed legalization and regulation of the stock exchange. There's so many things, right? Election day, voting. There's so many important topics that it's hard to talk about. So the reason it's struck down is it's easy to point out flaws. It's easy to say it won't work, or it's too expensive, or we're already doing too much. And like I was saying earlier, it's kind of like he's just asking. He doesn't have a really good solution on his post. He's asking, why is it so easy to knock these down? Why aren't Republican voters pissed off about this? And the reason being is it's easy. I hate to categorize all Republican politicians the same way, but for right now, it's easy to scare people to vote for you, right? It's easy to use fear to your advantage, to make people more willing to be afraid of the other person and vote for you because you're not that, right? They're going to take away your freedoms. They're going to take your guns. They're going to impose socialized medicine, whatever that means, right? They're going to raise your taxes. Even though Democrats, when you talk about the policy positions, and we'll talk specifically about taxes because I mentioned that before, have routinely said that they do not plan to raise taxes on the middle class and lower tiered people, right? Their plan has always been to increase taxes on the more wealthy people and on large corporations, because those groups have been paying a much lower tax rate than middle income and lower income people have been. So that's where that's been. And tax cuts, when Republicans talk about tax cuts, they will give some to middle income people. Middle income people might get a couple $100, right? And that's great. It's a couple $100. I can get a couple $100 back. What they're not saying is the tax cuts that they're giving to the ultra rich are saving those people and the big corporations, millions or billions of dollars in taxes that they should be spending. And that's why when they say tax cuts, they always throw in that little bit. Hey, you're going to get a couple $100. You're going to get $100 back, or you're going to get $200 back. Oh, don't worry about the wealthy people. They're getting a similar share. Nobody ever really looks into it. They hear tax cuts, I'm getting money back, perfect, right? That's something Democrats could do better, is when we talk about tax cuts, is focus in on that, right? The best place to, when you're thinking strategy to attack somebody, is attack where they think their strength is. And they think their strength is tax cuts and fear tactics, right? Fear tactics is a little bit harder to attack, but tax cuts is easier to attack, because you could always look back and look at their policy positions, look at the bills that they're written, and see how those tax cuts impact each group. You say, yeah, you're getting a couple $100 back. Under our plan, you're only going to get probably 50 back, but all these people are getting millions and billions of dollars in tax cuts, and what that means is your community is not going to get money it needs to survive. Your schools aren't going to get money. You go through wherever they're going to end up having to take money for. Or our deficits are going to shoot up, which is what usually happens. Is Republicans always talk about tax cuts and cutting spending, but they do the tax cuts and never really cut the spending. So deficits balloon and the debt increases, which is a whole other topic. But that's kind of where the messaging problem goes, and where the messaging goes awry, I think, for Democrats. Is it's not because Democrats are bad at it. They kind of are sometimes. It's just that it's way more complicated and there's way more topics to cover than Republicans typically have. So it's easier for a Republican candidate to rally around, and it's easier to scare their voters to vote for them, right? And that's why they succeed. There is one comment I kind of wanted to highlight from this thread that kind of encapsulates another facet of this. So let's take a look. This is a comment from Wandering Mind Travels. Every politician makes promises they can't or won't keep. Trump made dozens of them. Mexico paying for the wall is the first one that comes to mind. I suggest the problem is twofold. First, voters want to be told a president or a governor is going to fix everything and make their lives wonderful. They don't want to hear that it's complicated. They won't get everything they think they want. Where does this supposed lack of trust of Dems come from? It doesn't come from facts. For example, for the past 40 years, the economy has always done better under a Democratic president than a Republican one. Yes, Obama had higher job growth than Trump. The policies that Republicans push, primarily just tax cuts for the rich and lax regulations of companies, end up harming the average American. So what's behind the view of Democrats that can't be trusted? Well-executed propaganda, particularly by the wealthy, to keep the average American focused on culture war nonsense so they don't realize their pockets are being picked by the oligarchs. So I wanted to highlight this comment because it kind of strikes at what I was saying. When we're talking messaging from Republicans funded by those wealthy individuals that keep getting those big tax cuts, remember, is propaganda about, hey, those scary Democrats are going to come for you, right? And when he's talking about the focus on the culture war, that's what he's talking about, is you're distracting people with fear. And it helps keep the wealthy people in power, keeps getting them tax cuts, keeping them free money, and giving them more power and more money so they take up a larger and larger and larger share of the U.S. economy. And when he's talking about Democrats have proven to be better for the economy than Republicans, that has been true over a variety of economic metrics. I'm not going to go through those, but every president basically since Eisenhower, if you go back, Democrats have proven to be better at the economy than Republicans have overall, pretty much to a T. And the first part where he says promises can't be kept or people think that it's going to be magically solved by a president or a governor, that's true as well. I remember in 2008 when President Obama was first elected, at the end, there was a big feeling in the Democratic liberal community, hey, we did it, he'll fix it, he'll take care of it, we don't need to do anything more. That's not how governance works. The election is just a starting point. And I know a lot of people don't have the energy to spend full time on elections, and that's not what it's going to take. But when you need to be plugged in enough to know when big things are happening, that you need to contact your congressperson, your senator, maybe call, show up. There's things that you still need to be done post-election. The president, governors, other elected officials, their job is to run the government, but they will listen to the loudest voices. And a lot of times the loudest voices are the lobbyists in the room that are paid by the well-connected and the wealthy. The little person's voice is usually not in those rooms. And you're hoping that the president or congressperson can keep that in mind, but if they're not hearing from their constituents that they like or don't like something, they're gonna go what they think, and people are biased to whatever they think is smart information coming from somebody that is in a position to know. And a lot of times these are experts in the individual industries, so it's hard to discount them completely from the conversation. So what do you think? Why do you think Democrats struggle so much with getting their message out when a lot of their policies are popular among the general public? Is it just they can't talk about it in a way that makes sense, or is it a combination of that plus better messaging by the Republicans? Is the Republican message easier? What do you think is the reason why? I'd love to hear what you have to say. Please, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do so. It costs you nothing. Obviously, like the video and share it out to your friends. Let them know what we're talking about here, and hopefully we can have a robust conversation in the comments. I look forward to hearing what you have to say. Until I see you around the internet, you have a great night. Bye.